Small encampments of homeless people line every single intersection. Violence has spiked. Most businesses have been wiped out or looted into non-existence. Syringes and feces line the sidewalks and the intersections. There's gas shortages, and when there's no shortage of gas, it's unbelievably expensive. There are uncontrollable fires, roving gangs that nobody can stop only because I think nobody's actually trying. And everybody is wearing a face mask. Is this the new Mad Max? No, it's just California. The state that is becoming a gulag, the state that has gone to hell. It's really hard to understand how bad California is unless you talk to some of the poor souls that have been trapped there. Now, do you want to hear something even more crazy? Believe it or not, take a look around. California. The Democrats are using California as the model for the entire country. Seriously, look at your community. We have rising gas prices, shuttered businesses, commodity prices spiking, anti-police rallies, critical race theory. All of that crap is from California. California is becoming Main Street, your town. They want their failure to become your future. And the left is making California the test model, and your state or your town is next. A good friend of mine who I've been thinking an awful lot of lately, seeing the violence that is spiked against Jewish people, is Dave Rubin. He moved to Los Angeles out of New York City about a decade ago, so he knows what a tough town is. But in the time that he has lived in Los Angeles, he has watched it descend into absolute chaos. He's right there, right in the middle of it. Now, most of his news and comedy friends have fled. For some strange reason, he hasn't. And I really want to know why. And more importantly, how? How is he going to exist in California? Welcome to the program, Mr. Dave Rubin.
Glenn, I'm fairly certain that was the most depressing intro I've ever received on one of these news programs. I knew what I was walking into today, but I didn't realize how close to the bone it was going to cut. Yes, I am in crazy Los Angeles right now, and we will discuss why.
Well, I want to talk to you about Los Angeles and California because I think, Dave, we are headed, for some reason, they either are so stupid that they don't know that California isn't working, or they're intentionally trying to destroy all of us. And I think it's the latter. But almost everything that has come from California and you're doing in California is now just being exported everywhere across the United States. And we don't want any of it.
Yes. Well, recently, just a few weeks ago, I was with you in Dallas, and the contrast between Texas and California is extraordinary. And I'll give you a little sort of blue sky stuff first, which is that in some ways, watching the states since COVID go in such polar opposite directions, meaning that living in Texas is now drastically different than living in California. Living in New York is now drastically different than living in Florida. In some ways, shows you the strength of our system, right? I mean, this is actually what federalism is, and this was the point, that we would have these states that could make decisions for themselves, and then we would constantly have this laboratory that would allow you to choose where you wanted to live, what views and policies made more sense for you and your family. And if you were okay with high taxes because you thought it was perhaps going to lead to better education, then maybe you would want to go to California. And if you wanted low taxes, you could say go to Florida or something like that. Now, of course, what we often find out is that raising taxes has nothing to do with better education. In most cases, it's actually the reverse.
Correct.
But the general idea that right now you in Dallas and me in LA, we're both part of America, but are in very different places governed by very different principles, is actually kind of good. Now, that being said, what I have seen, as you alluded to in my almost decade here in Los Angeles, is that it's nothing like the place I moved to. I mean, the amount of homeless encampments virtually everywhere, under every bridge. We know that a lot of the fires that you also mentioned, that they're started in homeless encampments. We also just, supposedly survived this pandemic Well, are these people wearing masks and socially distancing? There's such a litany of problems, and all Democrats want to do is just throw money at it. I mean, go to Venice Boardwalk, go to where Hulk Hogan came from in Muscle Beach. Man, it's scary. It looks like a zombie apocalypse.
Let me show you something that is going on in the homeless camps. Let's play the first cut, gang members. Watch this.
Police say this man is a member of the Bloods gang. Vicodin, codeine, a Ziploc bag of prescription drugs, none in his name, found on him.
Rival gang members are working together to sell drugs.
It's one of several police encounters NBC4 cameras captured.
That's heroin.
Riding with LAPD officers on Skid Row.
He actually stabbed a man in the head with an ice pick.
Officer Dion Joseph has worked these streets for 19 years.
This is the worst I've ever seen it. There are hundreds and hundreds of gang members and their associates hiding amongst the homeless.
First of all, how did that happen? How did California, when I grew up, was the state I wanted to live in? I lived up in the Pacific Northwest. There was nothing more beautiful and more pristine and healthy than California, and it slowly turned into this. How did it get here?
Progressive politics. It really is as simple as that. When you have one state, in this case, Democrat-run policies, that always sound right, but never do anything. Oh, we have a homeless problem. What should we do? Throw more money at it, not discuss mental health, not discuss policing or any of those other issues. It's just always about throwing more money at things. So right now, the Venice Boardwalk has been completely overrun. The Venice Boardwalk, it's famous worldwide, where the skate park is, and so much cool music and culture came from this part of California, and it's completely decimated. You know, you can see what some of the images that I see you guys are throwing to right now. Some of these are in downtown Los Angeles. Some of them are sort of in the mid-Wilshire area. It's pretty much everywhere. And then what they do is, then we bring in DAs like we have here in Los Angeles right now. We have this guy, George Gascon, who was the former DA of San Francisco, who by every estimation ruined San Francisco. Everyone knows that people are fleeing San Francisco. Well, what happens? He then becomes the DA of Los Angeles. By the way, he replaced the first female black DA that Los Angeles ever had. Now, I don't care about identity politics, but it's sort of ironic considering he's a straight white man and he was Bernie backed. So they took out the first black female DA. Not that that makes you qualified in and of itself, obviously, but it's just such a system of just failure and failure and failure. And the more you wreck things, the better you will be in terms of your career.
How is that? Why? Why?
Because progressives don't have solutions. This has been a very hard conclusion for me to come to. As a guy that wrote a book defending liberalism right over my shoulder, I have come to the uncomfortable conclusion that at the end of a purely secular liberalism, where the state is supposed to be the be-all and end-all to everything, you will always have this destructive force at the end. Because what the progressives have done is trick everybody into thinking that victimhood is virtue. So they constantly want to, pretend that they're doing things for marginalized groups. They constantly want to tell you they're doing things for homeless people or for black people or for gay people. But in most cases, they're doing nothing for them other than perpetuating the problems that may or may not exist in the first place. So just throw money to homeless people. Well, congratulations. Right now, Gavin Newsom is giving all this housing to homeless people. Do you think that stops what the root problem is, that may be either psychological or have to do with the economy or anything else? No, you're actually just putting often very drug addicted, mentally ill people in hotels. And you're saying basically stay there forever. And then what happens, as of course you know, well, then the crime starts in those areas. And then you actually start exporting the crime into suburban areas. So I think it's just the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't blame most of the average progressive populace that sort of thinks they don't want to think about these issues, right? This is why politics is so messy. Most people don't want to think about issues. So they tell you, okay, there's a homeless problem. What do you say? Well, we better fund anti-homeless initiatives. And then do they ever work? No, they just don't. So it's entrenched interests. It's very similar to our problems here related to teaching. Everyone's so upset about, our school system here in California. Well, it's funded to the tilt, but the answer is always, just give it more money and suddenly they'll be better, and they never are.
So the latest on homelessness is a government-run homeless camp in East Hollywood. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this.
I am.
The lot can hold up to 70 tents of approximately 120 people in 12 by 12 foot white squares painted on the asphalt. Campers can bring in their own tents and whatever belongings they have. There are half a dozen porta potties on one side of the lot. The site also provides showers, 3 meals a day, 24/7 security. Homeless men and women at the site also entered into the county's database and will get social services. It says ideally will get the social services they need. The price tag is $2,663 per person per month. Dave, can't you rent an apartment for that?
Yes, you can. I don't live in the best part of Los Angeles. I don't live in Beverly Hills. But yes, you can rent an apartment. And by that, to over $2,000 per person. I mean, you can also get roommates and, defray your costs in all sorts of ways. But again, this is exactly what they do with everything. They incentivize bad behavior. And then do you think any of those people who, Glenn, we've talked about this many times. I mean, the main reason people live in SoCal is for the weather. I mean, that is truly at this point, and my feelings on this. I'm trying to figure out the long-term plan here. But mainly people live here for the weather. And as you referred to before, you were in the Pacific Northwest. Well, you could come down a little bit and you could be in Northern Cali and wine country, and then the weather in SoCal and San Diego and all of those things.
It's beautiful.
But you're incentivizing homeless people to come here from all over the country, then say, we're going to set you up. And the real issue is, this is the stat that they'll never show you. When they set up these camps, how many people do they ever set right? How many people go to those camps and somehow, because of the coaching or whatever it is that they're doing, are just there temporarily? Because that's what a healthy society would do. You'd only be homeless temporarily because we would be able to help you properly. But instead now we give drugs to people. We're just doing everything wrong because we don't really want to think about things.
Okay, when I come back, I want to show you another plan that they have for the homeless, and I'd love to get your take on this. The tiny homes of California in just a second. First, let me tell you about home title lock. I've warned you about home title theft before, where cyber thieves remove you from your home's title, and they actually become the owner. I've said for a long time you got to get home title lock because it's coming, and the only one that'll do it is home title lock. Well, Facebook has had that big breach, and it's here. Facebook had 500 million accounts exposed to cyber thieves. And according to a retired FBI cybercrime expert, everything thieves need to take over as the owner of your home was in that information. Name, address, personal information, all of it is out, but only for 500 million people. That's it. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim, and the deed is theirs. And you don't know about it until they've racked up a lot of debt with that as collateral, and they skip town. Now, when you're not paying for that debt, you don't even know anything about it. There's a knock on the door, and it's a sheriff, and he says, "Time to evict. You're out." Wait, this is my house. I don't have any loans on it, or the loan I do have is paid for. Not anymore, and nothing will save you. HomeTitleLock.com. HomeTitleLock.com. Register your address to see if you're already a victim, then sign up for 30 free days of protection during this high-risk breach. Again, go to HomeTitleLock.com. Use the promo code RADIO. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code RADIO.
This here on Chandler Boulevard in North Hollywood is the very first tiny home community in the city of Los Angeles. The tiny homes are 64 square feet, relatively small, but in each tiny home there are 2 beds, there are 4 windows, there is an air conditioning, there's heating. For anybody that walks on the property here, one of the first things that you'll notice is the vibrancy of colors. Colors just breathe life and hope. We provide 3 meals a day, and there's a hygiene trailer, so they have showers, they have clothes, they have case management, housing navigation, they have mental health services, job training, job placement. It's a one-stop shop that helps somebody move from the streets to sustainability to permanent housing.
So, Dave, I've seen those tiny little houses before. I saw them in Iraq as I was helping the refugees out of their tiny little houses. it looked exactly like that. And you know what I didn't notice at first, color. What I noticed was
they're colorful,
squalor.
Glenn. They must be doing something good.
Yeah, right. I mean, we are now suggesting people live like they do in the Middle East in an internment camp, if you will.
And it's being sold to them under the guise of compassion. Like, oh, look how great this city is. We are going to put you in these little colorful boxes. Now, the question that never gets answered is, okay, let's just say we can go along with their premise. They took some people that were struggling off the streets. They put them into these houses and programs. The real question is the long-term viability of those people as functioning citizens afterwards. And as far as I can tell, there's no numbers on this. People don't get out of these things. We know about the cycle of poverty. We know what affirmative action has done to the black community. We know these things over and over. And I would look at it this way, if in the simplest terms, if America was a completely blank slate right now, and we were about to split up 50 states, if certain states said, hey, we're going to have low taxes, low regulation, we're going to let you figure out your life and just sort of get to it. And then there was other states that were like, you know, we're going to have high taxes, high regulation, and we're going to be very involved in your life. It is so obvious. It is so profoundly obvious, actually, which of those would succeed and thrive and which of them would falter and fail. So all of these programs, they don't work because ultimately they really become, I think, sort of a grift up the ladder, that it's just like, who's getting those contracts? Well, I guarantee you the people getting those contracts for the land and the housing and the permits and everything else, it all just kind of trickles up, probably all the way to the governor's office. I'm not saying it's some grand conspiracy, but this is sort of how the swamp works. It keeps protecting its own. So we'll just keep taking tax money from people who produce. We'll just keep taking more and more of their money. We'll put it in these projects, and then these people will need us even more. And that's how that cycle never ends.
He just announced, Governor Newsom just announced a $12 billion proposal for homeless initiatives. And I want to quote him, in what is lauded as the single biggest investment any state has ever made to address homelessness. On Tuesday, he announced the $12 billion proposal to create affordable housing.
Glenn,
how long before we know that is a success or failure, and will anyone check?
Well, call me cynical here, but I think Gavin Newsom, in effect, wants an underclass in his state, well, not his state, in our state, that will never be able to do anything for themselves and will always be reliant on the government. $12 billion. Now, first off, the numbers are starting to mean nothing because they just tax the high hell out of everybody.
Yep.
As you referenced earlier, most of my colleagues have left, and I know plenty of people that are seriously wealthy that have been here for a long time, that have been more than okay paying their taxes. But then when the entire system starts breaking down, eventually, the rubber meets the road and you got to go. But Gavin Newsom, I mean, again, this is what progressives do. $12 billion to stop homelessness. Okay, on face value, if you don't think about things deeply, it sounds kind of good. Okay, we're going to stop homelessness through money. Well, how about this, Gavin Newsom? How about you cut taxes? How about you cut regulation? How about you do something about policing so that people feel that they can open up businesses that aren't going to have their windows broken or the store burned to the ground? How about you do something that allows human flourishing so that we will have less homeless people? Because the more productive people are, the more jobs there are, the more initiative there is to get up and go in the morning, the better mental health will be, the less drug use there will be. I mean, these things are all connected. But progressive policies are, we got a problem, let's make up a number, we'll tax the hell out of somebody, they'll get out of here, and we'll continue the problem.
Well, Dave, I have to take umbrage, and that's not a word I use lightly. I have to take umbrage. He is doing something about the police. This is a tweet from him. In celebrating George Floyd's life, we strengthen our resolve to fight systematic racism and excessive use of force in policing and progress towards a more inclusive society. So he's reimagining the police force. He's doing those things.
He's reimagining. They're always reimagining things. I would rather them actually do things than just imagine what they're doing. But what's interesting about that tweet And what they constantly do is, so Gavin Newsom, well, we've basically been run by Democrats forever here. We had a little blip with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but California's basically been run by Democrats. All the big cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, et cetera, are run by Democrats. So if you're telling me there's systemic racism in policing, then you're telling me that the Democrats are systemically racist, which, by the way, I can make a pretty solid argument that they are. It's not the Republicans or the conservatives that are trying to inject racism.
Go ahead, make that. The floor is yours. Make that case.
Well, we know this is what they are doing with all of these diversity and equity and inclusion programs. They are putting racial quotas into all of our systems. And when I say our systems, I mean our educational systems. Just ask Asian people trying to go to Harvard. It is officially harder. Harvard has a policy to discriminate against Asian people because Asian people succeeded at all of the markers of success in America, socially, culturally.
Sorry, my dog. Yeah, go ahead.
The dog,
okay.
Dog's not happy about that.
Yeah, he's not happy.
But what happened? Not only did Harvard do that, but then every Senate Democrat voted to allow that. In other words, Ted Cruz put a bill to the floor to say we have to stop discrimination against Asian people at places of higher education. Every single Democrat voted against it. So you can make many, many arguments that the Democrats now are the ones instituting systemic racism. I mean, look at the COVID relief bill. What did they do? If you were a black or otherwise marginalized farmer, you got more money. Well, you know what, Glenn? I'm fairly certain there's a lot of poor white farmers in the middle of the country, and I think they deserve as much help. If anyone deserves help, we should be treating people equally. But I know they like equity over equality.
I will tell you that I'm up right now at my ranch in a farming community of about 500 people. The next town over is 2,000 people. Everybody is a farmer. And this is the only time that I have heard anyone talk about racism up here. Because there's not a problem. People move in and they become farmers. And I know one farmer up here that pretty much everybody disagrees with their lifestyle. But when they have a problem, they come over en masse to fix their water pump or to, help them with their crops or whatever, because we're all in the same boat. And this is the first time I've ever seen anger at the federal government on this level, where they've said, wait a minute, we are all farmers. They broke it down from Americans. We're all farmers. We all help each other. How come the person who's working down the farm right down the street, they'll get bailout, but we won't because we're white? It's racism. It's absolute racism.
It's absolute racism. It's not reverse racism. It's racism, period. And again, it's systemic racism. When the left talks about systemic racism, they can never find it, right? Because, Glenn, I know for a fact, if there were any laws in the United States that were racist, meaning black people can't do this, white people get this special privilege, would you and I be screaming, fighting against it? Of course we would.
Yes.
Of course we would. They could not find one law. That's not to say that there weren't laws, right? So Jim Crow, and we've had bad things in the past, okay? And we can discuss those things. But they couldn't find them now, so they've decided to actually inject them into the system. That is what they are basically proving their own ridiculousness. They say something, and then they're the ones that put it in the system. You show me someone, some conservative somewhere that wants any policy based on race. But I can show you plenty of Democrats that want policies based on race. This is a huge problem.
Oh, well, I can show you, everybody thinks that the Nazis are conservatives. No, Richard Spencer isn't for either party, but he's a socialist, and he wants to get rid of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. That doesn't sound like a conservative I know at all. Back on schools in just a second, but I also want to ask what COVID has done to the state of California. Back in a minute. We just celebrated Memorial Day this week. I hope you had an enjoyable day off and were able to spend some time relaxing, but also reflecting on the people who have given the most that they had so we can continue to live free in this country. The lives of our veterans are precious. We're thankful for their service and their dedication. The ones that are former military, the ones who are lost, but also the ones that are still fighting on our behalf. We haven't stopped these crazy wars yet. Goldline has decided to celebrate Memorial Week. In honor of our veterans, Goldline is sending a free 1-ounce pure silver Lady Liberty silver round with every order placed this week. No additional cost to you. And both new clients are existing clients are eligible. Additionally, Goldline will send you 2 free 1-ounce pure silver Lady Liberty silver round with every IRA order that is placed or application submitted this week. Don't miss this opportunity. It's just a few days this week. Goldline at 1-866-GOLDLINE, 1-866-GOLDLINE or goldline.com.
Well, Governor, news outlets like the AP are pointing out that California and Florida have virtually identical case rates, even though California's had strict rules and Florida's essentially been wide open. Florida also has a booming economy, a booming real estate market, and much lower unemployment rate than California, 4.8% compared to 9%. I also have to point out that California has the lowest percentage of kids in schools and the 7th worst mortality rate. I'd much rather live in Florida than California right now. How do you explain that?
Well, we have our positivity rate is 3 times less than Florida at the current moment. We have a lower death rate than Florida. We have a lower case rate than Florida. In this pandemic, the story still needs to be told. But that said, let's be just candid about this. Florida and California are very different in every way, shape, or form. In this respect, most importantly, the issue of density is profoundly significant as it relates to the disease spread, the disease burden, particularly multi-generational households and density. Just consider just LA alone. Its density is 7 times greater than that of Miami. And so I'm not here to critique other states. Quite the contrary, save one, and that was Texas, that notably, I think, made a terrible, reckless mistake on setting down the gauntlet on removing masks, not implementing strategies to enforce and be more aggressive on mask wearing. And at the same time, I think what we've done is save lives.
Saved lives. Dave Rubin joins me again. Dave, as I listen to the governor, I mean, you could say he made a bunch of honest mistakes, but it's kind of hard to believe. How did Gavin Newsom view COVID?
Glenn, first off, can you have your producer put his finger on the bleep button so that I can say what I really think? Is that possible? the guy, here we go. The guy is a total bullshit artist. That is what this guy is. He saw an opportunity to grab power and he took it. And that's what most politicians do. Let's not forget, at the height of the lockdowns and the riots and everything else, he was caught indoors at French Laundry, which is one of the most expensive restaurants in the entire United States, with about 20 people. Several of them turned out to be lobbyists, actually. And their bar bill alone was $15,000. They were not socially distancing, wearing masks or anything else. That's just one instance of this. And by the way, there are many other instances. And I think what gets to the heart of this is when you give people power, they suddenly just want more power. So you may remember the incident where California, when they went in our second outdoor dining lockdown, we had opened up outdoors temporarily, and then we went in the second lockdown, and there was a woman by the name of Sheila Kuhl, who's just a county administrator, and she was the deciding vote, 3-2, to put us in further outdoor lockdowns. Well, you're not going to believe this, Glenn. You know where she went right after she made that vote to destroy more lives and wreck the economy further? She went to her favorite Italian restaurant outdoors in Santa Monica and sat there because the lockdown wasn't going to kick in for another 24 hours or so. But that type of hypocrisy, I actually went to the rally at her house. The next day, there was a big rally to open up the state and, shine light on what a hypocrite she was. And the people that I met there, and this is the key point, the people that I met there were not scary right-wingers or even conservatives or anything like that. Most of the people, they're Democrats because this is such a Democrat-run city and state. They are Democrats who suddenly can't go to work, can't put food on the table. They're trapped at home. They don't trust their leaders. Their lives are being destroyed, and they're suddenly waking up. So in many cases, there's been a mass red pilling of the Democrats here, which is a silver lining to all of this, because I think a liberal that meets reality is suddenly a conservative.
But they have also been so blue-pilled on, we'll give you all this free stuff and we're going to spend money on the homeless, all of that stuff. So is it really just against Newsom, or are they actually waking up that, gosh, these guys are really reckless? And I mean these guys, meaning all of the officials that we've elected in California.
Yeah, it's hard to say because, well, first off, I mean, I can give you some empirical evidence. We know that California had the first net loss of population ever this year. First time in the history of California. So that tells you that a certain amount of people are waking up and they're saying, you know what, the 82 and sunny every day in SoCal isn't enough, and I'm going to move to Texas and save a whole lot of money and be with, sort of saner people. I can tell you that I've met a lot of people, and of course this is anecdotal, but I've met a lot of people who are also frustrated because on the education side, their kids are being taught critical race theory and everything else. So they're getting kids out of school. And then of course, it's also infecting private schools. So there's a series of other problems there. But look, when you can't go downtown, if you were to go outside the Staples Center where the Lakers play, it's not safe. That's right by Skid Row that you guys played in the package earlier. If you are just to go down the main thoroughfare where I live, almost everything is closed. Now, things I suppose will suddenly reopen, but they've already trained people. They've trained people that, when we have to shut you down for whatever reason we might, guys, COVID-2, super COVID, the new variant, well, everyone will just bow down and behave. And that's what I'm really worried about. The sort of mass conditioning of people that, Glenn, we're a year and a half off of 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and nobody even uses that phrase anymore.
Is there a point that these people wake up? I mean, we're in Texas and, a few people wear a mask. And it's usually because they have something extra going on or whatever. And there's some people that just feel comfortable wearing a mask. But generally speaking, you've been here. Nobody's wearing a mask,
Yeah.
If you're seeing one in the store, it's now because the business is saying you got to wear a mask. And so they wear a mask, but none of the customers are wearing it. But I think it is almost, I hate to use this, Dave, but it's almost as if the mask for the mask in the view of liberals is almost like a yellow star, and some people on the conservative side will see the double mask as the red armband. I mean, we're dividing, and it has nothing to do with health.
No, it has nothing to do with health. It has absolutely nothing to do with health. I mean, just this weekend in Los Angeles, I was out hiking outdoors, beautiful sunny day, and people are wandering around with masks. And at some point, you're going, well, wait a minute. You're actually going against CDC guidelines at this point. Mm-hmm. I thought you guys are the ones that are supposed to believe in science, and these are young, otherwise healthy people. And this is where, for people like us that believe in individual rights and personal responsibility, if you so choose to still wear a mask, if you own, say, a restaurant, if you want people to come in wearing masks or whatever you want your employees to do, regardless of my feelings about the efficacy of masks at this point or the conflicting messages we've gotten over the years, then I believe in individual choice. And by the way, if you don't want to go to a restaurant where they want you to wear a mask, then don't go to that restaurant. But we've decided to trade in all of our decision making, all of our sense making, so that we can listen to this elite group of people who seemingly get everything wrong at every turn. The simple truth is that when you guys opened up in Texas, Gavin Newsom sent out a tweet that day in effect saying, this is an absolute disaster, and wait till you see when this disaster comes. And guess what? Not only did the disaster not happen, but my friend was able to send me a picture. My buddy who you met, actually, Glenn, my buddy sent me a picture with his 3 kids watching a baseball game in Texas, in the stadium, a packed stadium, and they had huge smiles on their faces, and they were thrilled. And it was very bizarre for me to see that picture and think, wow, how novel that is. Because you know what? Freedom has a little bit of risk involved. And that's what our founders knew. And that's what these guys don't know or refuse to acknowledge.
Well, let me, before we take a break, let me give you another 3 minutes of Gavin Newsom and what he is saying about COVID. Listen.
When this pandemic ends, and it will end soon, we're not going to go back to normal.
because I think we all agree normal was never good enough. Normal accepts inequity. That's why Latinos are dying from COVID at a higher rate than any other racial or ethnic group. And while essential workers' wages aren't enough for them to afford the essentials. And why mothers have been leaving the workforce in staggering numbers. Look, our eyes are wide open to what's wrong. And so our journey back must also be a path to close those inequities. There is no economic recovery without economic justice.
Dave?
Glenn, this guy's evil. I don't know what to say other than that. I hate to make that sort of
you don't use that word.
I
don't use that word. I've never heard you use that.
Glenn, I truly try not to. I try not to impugn motives, but at some point, he's telling you right up front the line, we're not going back to normal. I'll tell you this, Glenn, I would gladly go back to normal. The year and a half ago that now seems like the good old days, you give me February 2020, I think pretty much every single person in America would gladly go back to that. But what he's saying is, our grand project of reorganizing the structure of society has not been complete. So we are now going to have equity programs. And of course, by equity, when the trick of equity is that they're implying that he will somehow do something to lift the Latino community. But in essence, we know that the programs don't work. But what will they do? They will crush other communities. They will destroy opportunities for other communities. And that's how we'll have equity. What capitalism does is rise everybody like this. And sometimes there are inequities related to some people are born rich. Some people are born with great physical skills. Some people are born smart, hard work and luck. All of the gestalt of life has a little something to do with whether you succeed. When they talk about equity, they are going to actually crush everybody down, but they don't let a crisis go to waste. So they saw the pandemic and they said, now's our chance to reorganize society. And thankfully, a guy like you lives in a state with a halfway decent governor. And thankfully, there are people like Ron DeSantis in Florida who said, no, we're not here to reorganize society. We're here to protect people's rights.
Yeah. All right. I've got a few more questions for you, Dave, and some of them are kind of personal when we come back. Let me tell you about Relief Factor. If you're one of the millions of Americans who suffer every day from pain, I want you to listen up. There is hope, and it comes in the form of Relief Factor. Every day, including this morning, I was reading a testimonial of one of the guys who tried Relief Factor, and he said within the first 3 days, his pain had reduced. Within the next couple of weeks, it was almost gone. Only a couple of years ago, I was in the same exact place he was, and I didn't believe Relief Factor would work for me either. They're very clear. 70% of the people who order Relief Factor, try it for 3 weeks, go on to order more month after month after month. But not everybody does. It's about 70% that try it and it doesn't work for them. So they want you to try it for 3 weeks, and they're telling you up front, if it doesn't work in 3 weeks, it's probably not going to work for you. If you want a drug-free and natural way to get your life back, just go to ReliefFactor.com. That's ReliefFactor.com.
The haters did. They are forced to bring awareness to the situation that they are in because other people put them in that situation.
My question is, in this case, where is the white student union? Because we need all races for equality.
You don't need a white student union, Jake. You get everything.
If your parent wants to talk to me about their profession and their opinion on their profession, I would love to hear that. I know very little about anything else in the world other than education, okay? However, if your parent wants to come talk to me about how I'm not doing a good enough job in distance learning based on what you need as an individual, just dare them to come at me. Because I am so sick to my stomach of parents trying to tell educators how to do their job. I have never once gone to a doctor's appointment and tried to tell my medical health provider how to treat me.
Oh my God.
You know why? Because I know nothing about that. I didn't get my degree in medicine. I am going off. I'm sorry.
Maybe. Dave, the worst export of California is your school system. It is now, critical race theory is all over the nation. The teachers union really are the main carrier of it. And the arrogance is insane from these teachers. There are people they're trying to stop it. When they do, the teachers say, I don't care. I'm just going to do it anyway. What's happening?
They have traded in objectivity for ideology. That woman, I mean, I suppose she was trained as an educator, but if that sounded like what an educator is supposed to sound like, then something has seriously gone wrong here. And I think we can agree that that is the case. Chris Rufo, who I believe you've talked to over the last couple of months, who's one of the leading legal experts fighting critical race theory in schools, is doing a great job going from state to state, and he's mostly getting red states to say, we will not put this stuff in school. And there seems to be some controversy around that, whether that's somehow an infringement on free speech. He's not saying you can't talk about it. He's saying that we can't teach this the same way we wouldn't teach the principles of race essentialism, of Nazism in schools. I mean, this is just so profoundly obvious. But you know, when you began this program saying that this is what we're exporting across the United States, that is what is so dangerous about it. I mean, are we seeing suddenly that California students are doing much better in tests? Are we seeing that they are better educated? Or are we seeing that they're more tolerant? Are we seeing that they're more purpose-driven or happy? I mean, there's no markers to prove any of that. And on top of the fact that now we've trapped them at home for so long, and the litany of mental health issues that we're going to have over the next decade at least is just going to be extraordinary.
I sit here and I think we're living in the Soviet Union around the time of Chernobyl, where everybody knew Pravda was a lie, the television was a lie, their politicians were lying to everybody. Knew we're there, aren't we?
Solzhenitsyn, they're lying, we know they're lying, they know we know they're lying. That's basically what we're in right now. This is probably the most important issue to talk about because it sort of undercuts everything else. If we don't have a trusted class, whether that's academic experts or a political class that is at least somewhat trustworthy or a media class that is trustworthy, then the fabric of a country cannot stay in any sort of cohesive state. If everyone just believes different things, if half the country, in effect, has bought into the idea that America is fundamentally racist, that systemic racism is evil, that things that they teach you in critical race theory, like being on time and being punctual and being a hard worker, that these are facets of white supremacy, their words, not mine. If we've really got to that point, then how do we ever turn that around? I mean, that's the problem. You know, 10 years ago, Glenn, people would say, okay, liberals were fighting against conservatives. But there was a basic idea that or let's go back a little bit further even, to a great senator from when I was growing up and I lived in New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a true liberal. There was no doubt that Daniel Patrick Moynihan loved America as much as, say, his conservative colleagues in the Congress, in the Senate. Now it's very different. I mean, show me the progressives who love America. They won't even say they love America. What they'll tell you is they want a fundamental change of America. They'll tell you that America is systemically evil, that they are here to alter America. So we basically have imported a system of ideas into the system to destroy the system. For the sci-fi people watching, it's sort of like the Alien movies. We've let this thing in, and now it's using the host, the body of America, it's using it to incubate basically a terrible set of ideas that eventually will burst forth. Maybe it's burst forth already, but that's why guys like us have a lot of work to do.
Well, I think Americans have a lot of work to do because the solution isn't in you and me. It is going to be found within the people. Absolutely. But I'm not sure the people know exactly what to do. Because this noose is getting tighter and tighter around the average person's neck. Dave, I thought of you every day for the last couple of weeks because you said to me when you were in Dallas the last time, Glenn, I just think they're going to start beating Jews in the streets soon. And it was 2 days later you were back home. And that's exactly what was happening in the streets of Los Angeles and the streets around you. How are you feeling as...
Yeah. Glenn, this what's happened with the left and now with the Marxists, and they used to call themselves democratic socialists, and we don't even hear that anymore because they're in essence now saying that they're socialists. This is the time-tested fight that I think Jews, but more broadly, anyone that is freedom-loving has had to go through. Jews particularly don't fit the intersectional calculator because we're a minority with a particularly brutal history that has somehow survived. By any conventional thinking, it really doesn't make that much sense that Jews are still here despite the pogroms and the Holocausts and the Inquisitions and all of those things. But not only did Jews survive, but from an American perspective, Jews thrived because of the promise of America to be treated equally regardless of your religion or your national origin of your skin color. And that right there, that success as a minority, a success as a group that should be oppressed according to their worldview, that is the ultimate cog in the system for them that stops the wheels. It doesn't make sense. They need their black people to be oppressed. They need their gay people to be oppressed. They need their Jewish people to be oppressed. And because Jewish people decided to not be oppressed in America and decided to become part of the fabric of America and succeed at every level, at every socioeconomic and cultural level, Seinfeld is like the sitcom of America, and it's very Jewish in its humor, and obviously Jerry Seinfeld himself. Because Jews did that, it actually proves that social justice is nonsense. And by the way, when social justice meant fighting for equality, Martin Luther King Jr. equality, almost all of the people who were arm in arm with him, the white people, they were Jews, because Jews were not allowed in country clubs and Jews were not allowed in the parts of society that black people were fighting to enter as well. So on a personal note, it's been very depressing and very upsetting, obviously, and goes to why I'm sort of up in the air about where my future will be. But I would say...
That's why you shouldn't be up in the air. You should just move to Dallas.
I know. You almost made me an offer I couldn't refuse when I was there last time. I think you offered me a horse. Was that real? Well, look, let me just say one thing.
Hat, that would be a scream. Real quick.
Let me say one thing real quick, which is you. Look, I may join you in Texas, and I've got some callings in Florida on the way. But the truth is that if we really are at the point where someone who believes the things that I believe that we've laid out here, if we're at the point where that person can no longer live in California, then what we really are conceding is that the experiment is over, that the 250-year experiment of different states deciding that they are going to be part of the United States, that it no longer works. And if it no longer works, then we have a whole series of much scarier questions that maybe we should address on a future show.
And I think we're going to be doing that. Dave, thank you very much. Thanks for watching. Good night.